Hi, you guys. I am so excited about today's lesson. We are moving forward to solving equations, and today we are going to be learning to solve one-step equations. Solving equations is the very most important thing that you are going to learn to do in Math 1, and so we're going to be spending a lot of time on it, and Miss Kohler and I want to make sure that you have a really good understanding of how to do this. So, with that said, I am going to show you our first slide. Please, please, please make sure as you're going through this lesson with me that you have a piece of paper out, that you are taking notes, that you are doing the practice problems with me, and then in the end, make sure that you show all of your work for your quiz. You do need to turn all of those things in order to have this assignment as complete. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. The first definition that we are going to talk about is the definition of an equation. An equation is a number sentence that indicates that two expressions have the same value. Okay? It's important to realize when we're dealing with equations always have equal signs. Always. The last few lessons we've been dealing with expressions, and we know that expressions do not have equal signs. With expressions, you can simplify and you can evaluate, but you do not solve expressions, okay? Equations have equal signs, and we always solve an equation, okay? The next definition is what it means to be a solution of an equation. A solution of an equation is the value of the variable that makes the equation true. So if I give you an equation, let's say I give you an equation x, oops, sorry, my pen is being a little crazy here. Here we go. X plus 5 equals 10. Okay, this is an equation. The variable for this equation is x. We can see there's an equal sign, right? The solution of this equation would be x equals 5. And that's because if we plug 5 in for the x in this equation, 5 is what makes the equation true. We know that 5 plus 5 equals 10. Okay, so 5 is our solution. 5 is the value of the variable that makes the equation true. So when we are solving equations, we have to remember to follow the properties of equality. And we're going to talk about those on the next slide. So the addition property of equality says if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C, and C plus A equals C plus B. Okay, so this might seem a little bit confusing for you. So I'm going to go ahead and give us a new page. And I'm going to use numbers instead of variables. Okay, so let's say we have 5 equals 5. Okay, we know that this is a true statement. The property of equality for addition says that if we add 2 to this side and we add 2 to this side, it keeps the equation equal. Okay? Or let's say we have negative 10 equal to negative 10. Okay, so we have an equation. We know that both sides are equal. Negative 10 is equal to negative 10. The property of equality for addition says that if I add the same thing to both sides, that is going to keep my equation equal. Okay? So the addition property of equality says that if you add the same thing to both sides, that will keep your equation equal. The subtraction property of equality is just like the addition property of equality, except for it says that if we subtract the same thing from both sides of the equation, it keeps the equation equal. Okay, so let's say we have 6 equal to 6. Well, the subtraction property of equality says that if I subtract 2 from the right side and I also subtract 2 from the left side, it's going to keep this equation equal. Okay, so subtraction property of equality says that if we subtract the same thing from both sides, it keeps our equation equal. The multiplication property of equality says that if we have an equation and one side is equal to the other side, if we multiply both sides by the same number, it's going to keep the equation equal. Okay, so let me show you an example of the multiplication property of equality. So let's say we have 5 equal to 5, and let's say we times the left side by 2. We also have to times the right side by 2 to keep this equation equal. Okay, so whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do the exact same thing to the other side. And then the last one, the division property of equality, says that if we have an equation where one side is equal to the other side, as long as we divide both sides by the same thing, it keeps the equation equal. So let's say we have 25 equal to 25. If I divide the left side by 5, I also have to divide the right side by 5 to keep the equation equal. Okay, so these properties of equality, these are super, super important. When we solve equations, we have to follow the properties of equality. Okay, so whenever you solve an equation, this is really important. And I'm going to even type it. When you add, subtract, multiply, or divide one side of the equation by something, you have to do the same thing on the other side to keep the equation equal. Okay, so everyone needs to have this in your notes. When you add, subtract, multiply, or divide one side of the equation by something, you have to do the same thing on the other side to keep it equal. So if you add something to the left side, you have to add that same thing to the right side. If you subtract something from the right side, you have to subtract that same thing from the left side. If you multiply the right side by something, you have to multiply the left side by that same thing to keep it equal. Okay? Whenever you are solving equations, whatever you do to one side, you have to do the exact same thing to the other side to keep it equal. Okay, so our properties of equality, we know how important those are. The next thing that we need to talk about is how we actually solve an equation. Okay? When we solve an equation, we are going to isolate the variable by using inverse operations. Okay, remember in one of our first lessons I talked about how tricky the vocabulary for math is sometimes. Okay, inverse operations, that just means opposite. Okay, opposite operations. So addition and subtraction, those are opposite. For example, if you have a 5, the opposite of 5 would be a -5. If you have a +7, the opposite of a +7 would be a ~7. If you have a ~4, the opposite of ~4 would be to add 4. Okay? So inverse operations, those are just opposite operations. So addition and subtraction, those are inverse operations. And multiplication and division are inverse operations. Okay, so we're going to isolate the variable by using inverse operations. So basically what that means is we are going to get the variable all by itself. That's what isolate means. Okay, we're going to get the variable all by itself by using opposite operations. As we do this, we have to make sure we follow the properties of equality. So whatever you do on one side, you need to do the same thing on the other side to keep it equal. So let's go ahead and look at an equation and apply these rules. So here is an equation. For this particular lesson, we are going to be working on solving one-step addition or subtraction equations. So if we have this equation, x minus 12 equals 20, and we need to solve it, okay? So that means we need to figure out what can we plug in for the x to make the equation true. And I know some of you are smart enough to just guess, right? You could think in your head and you could say, okay, I know that if I plug 32 in for the x, 32 minus 12 equals 20. But it's not always easy to guess. It's not always easy to do it in your head. And so in this class, you need to follow the system I give you for solving equations, okay? I do not want anyone doing these in their head, okay? So we have x minus 12 equals 20. If we're going to solve this equation, our job is to isolate this variable. We want to get this variable all by itself by using opposite operations, okay? So that means I want to get rid of whatever is on the same side as the x. So you guys can see that here's my equal sign right here. Here's my right side of the equation. Here's my left side of the equation. On the left side of the equation, it is x subtract 12 equals 20. If I want this to just be an x, I've got to get rid of the subtract 12. Okay? So I do that by using opposite or inverse operations. To get rid of a subtract 12, the opposite of subtracting 12 would be to add 12. If we add 12 on the left side, we also need to add 12 on the right side. And so now on the left side, the subtract 12, add 12. That totally cancels off. We're left with just the x, which is what we wanted to have happen, equal to 20 plus 12, which is 32. Voila! X equals 32 is our solution. 32 is what makes the equation true. Okay? 32 minus 12 is 20. Okay, let's look at the next one. 21 equals b plus 9. So if we want to solve this equation for the b, we're trying to figure out what can we plug in for this b that will make it true. We follow our process of isolating our variable by using inverse operations. So this time, our variable is on the right side of the equation. Okay, and so if we want to get the b all by itself, we need to get rid of the add 9. The opposite of adding 9 is to subtract 9. So plus 9 minus 9 cancels out. We're left with a b on the right side of our equation, which is what we wanted to have happen. And because we subtracted 9 on the right side, we also have to subtract 9 on the left side so that we can keep the equation equal. 21 minus 9 is 12. Okay, b equals 12 is our solution. And whenever you're solving an equation, you should always check to make sure that your solution does make the equation true. We know that 12 plus 9 is 21. Okay, you guys, so now it is your turn to practice. So I'm going to put a problem up on the board, and I want you to write it down. After you write it down, push pause on the video for just a second, do the problem on your own piece of paper, and then push play and see if you did it correctly. Okay, so here is the problem that I want you to do. X subtract 5 equals 10. Write this problem on your piece of paper and then push pause. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this question together. To solve this equation for the x, we want to isolate the x. We want to get it all by itself. We can see that here's our equal sign. This is the right side. This is the left side. In order to isolate this variable, to get this variable all by itself, we're going to have to get rid of the subtract 5. So we use the opposite operation. The opposite of subtracting 5 is to add 5. And whatever we do on one side, we have to do the exact same thing on the other side. So if we subtract 5 on the left side, if we add 5 on the left side, we have to add 5 on the right side. So our solution would be x equals 10 plus 5, which is 15. Our last step would be to check to make sure that 15 gives us a solution to this equation. We know that 15 minus 5 is 10. Okay, I hope that you guys got that one correct. We are going to talk about a couple of other ones that you might see on your quiz. So 5 plus x minus 14 equals negative 15. Whenever you're solving an equation, remember your goal is to isolate the variable. Sometimes you may have to simplify the right side or the left side first before you move to using inverse operations to solve. Okay, so I want you to look at this equation right here. On the left side of our equation, okay, so this is our right side and this is our left side. Okay, on the left side of our equation, we have some terms that are like terms that we can combine, and we always want to do that first. Okay, so remember, when you're solving an equation, if there is something that can be simplified, you take care of that first. So to simplify the left side, you can see that we have a 5, which is a constant. We also have this negative 14 right here. So when we combine a 5 and a negative 14 in your calculator, make sure you have your calculators out today, 5 plus negative 14 would be a negative 9. So that leaves us with x minus 9 equals negative 15. Okay, now from here, we can isolate this variable x by using inverse operations. So if we want to get the x all by itself, we need to get rid of the subtract 9. The opposite of subtracting 9 is to add 9. So we're going to do that to both sides. And that leaves us with x equals, make sure you're using your calculator. You guys, I can't say that enough. You have to have a calculator for this class. Okay? Does everyone hear me on that? You guys, I'm being so serious. Please, if you don't have a calculator out, get it out right now. Okay? It's okay to use a calculator, and we want you to. Okay? Even if you think you know how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, I want you to check it with a calculator. Okay? That is going to be the thing that holds you guys up from being able to get these correct. Okay? So get out your calculators and type in negative 15 plus 9 in your calculator. Negative 15 plus 9 is a negative 6. Okay? And if we were to plug negative 6 back in the original equation, 5 plus negative 6 and then a negative 14 equals negative 15. Sorry, I ran out of room there. If you type that in your calculator, 5 plus negative 6 plus negative 14, you would get negative 15. Okay, so x equals negative 6. That is our solution. So let's do the next one. Now on the next one, what I want you to notice is this minus sign in front of the parenthesis. And we practiced these a lot. You guys did a lesson on it, you took a quiz on it, and then you also did an additional assignment. So whenever you have a minus sign in front of a parenthesis, that minus sign has to get distributed to both terms inside the parenthesis. Okay? It gets distributed like as if this were a -1. And remember, we want to simplify first. So let's go ahead and do that. -1 times 8 is -8. -8 times, what I want you to notice here is this -x. That's like having a -1x. Okay, so -1 times -1x is a positive 1x. Then we have 17 equals 10. And you guys, we are not done simplifying yet. We're not done simplifying because we can combine 7 and -8. 17 and -8. So 17 plus a -8 would be 9. So now we have 9 plus x equals 10. And we can now isolate the x. So to get this x all by itself, we have to get rid of the addition of 9. And I'm going to show you, you could actually just rewrite this. X plus 9 equals 10. Having 9 plus x, or x plus 9, that's exactly the same. Just like if you had 5 plus 4 or 4 plus 5, we know that that's the same. So to isolate this x, to get rid of the addition of 9, we're going to use subtraction. So we subtract 9 from the left side, we subtract 9 from the right side, we get x equals positive 1. And if we were to plug 1 back in to our original equation, it should make the equation true. So let's try it. 17 minus, in parentheses, 8 minus 1 equals 10. Remember, when you're evaluating an expression, you always do parentheses first. So 8 minus 1 is 7, and we know that 17 minus 7 is 10. So x equals 1. That is our solution. You guys, that is it. That is our lesson on solving one-step equations using an addition and subtraction. I am going to show you your quiz, and then I'm going to give you 3 problems to practice before you take your quiz. So as you practice the problems that I give you, I want you to write it down. I want you to then push pause. I want you to do the problem on your own piece of paper, then push play. Make sure you did it correctly. I want you to do all 3 problems, practice problems like that, and then take your quiz. Okay? So here we go. First problem. So this is your quiz. Question number 1, x plus 12 equals -10. So I'm going to give you a practice problem just like this one. Okay, so x plus 10 equals 12. So go ahead and push pause, do this one on your own, and then push play to see if you did it correctly. Okay, let's go ahead and solve this equation for the x. So we're going to isolate this variable by using inverse operations. So if we want the x to be all by itself, right now we can see that it's on the left side, the 12 is on the right side. So in order for the x to be all by itself, we have to get rid of the plus 10. To get rid of a plus 10, the opposite of adding 10 would be to subtract 10. And remember, you have to follow the properties of equality. So if you subtract 10 from the left side, you have to subtract 10 from the right side. So x equals 2. That is your solution. And then make sure you check to make sure that 2 plus 10 really does equal 12. And it does. Okay. So you guys, that was your question number 1. Okay, we just did one just like that. Let's go ahead and practice one like question number 2. (14) equals x minus 3. So write this one down, push pause, do it, and then push play to see if you did it correctly. Okay, to solve this equation for the x, we're going to isolate this x. Remember, this is our right side, this is our left side, here's our equal sign. So if we want to get this x all by itself, we want it to be all alone, we have to get rid of the subtract 3. The opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. And we know that a subtract 3, add 3, it's going to totally cancel out and leave us with just an x on the right side. And that's what we want to have happen. Because we added 3 to the right side, we also have to add 3 to the left side. So x equals 17. And we know that 14 does equal 17 minus 3. Okay, last one, number 3, and then you guys should be ready to take the quiz. Okay, so for question number 3, we have, let me give you a practice one. 4 minus negative x plus 2 equals negative 2. Okay, so push pause. Try this one on your own. Okay, let's go ahead and go through this. Make sure you did it correctly. The very first thing that we need to do is, because there is this minus sign in front of this parenthesis, we have to distribute it to all of the terms inside the parenthesis. We're going to distribute it as if it were a negative 1. Okay? We have this term right here, negative x. That's really like having a negative 1x. Okay, so let's go ahead and distribute first. Negative 1 times negative 1x is a positive 1x. And we can just put x, or we can put 1x. Same thing. And then we have a negative 1 times 2, which is a negative 2. So now we have 4 plus 1x minus 2 equals negative 2. We can continue to simplify this left side because 4 and negative 2 are both constants. Okay, so we can combine those. So the left side, once we simplify our like terms, the left side is x plus 2 equal to negative 2. From there, to isolate this x, to get it all by itself, we have to get rid of the plus 2 by doing a minus 2 on both sides. So x equals negative 4. That is our solution. Okay, you guys, I'm super excited, like I said, to be starting solving equations. They're super fun. Make sure that when you get as you're doing your quiz, please make sure that you write down each question, you show me your work, and you circle your answers. And then after you turn your quiz in, the next important step is to check back to see if it's been graded. Okay? Once you turn your quiz in, Ms. Kohler or I will grade your quiz, and then we're going to give you some feedback. Please make sure you check your feedback. Okay? That's where you're going to get help on what you missed and to know what your next step is. Okay? So with that said, you guys go ahead and do your quiz. Please turn it into the assignment box for solving one-step equations, and we will see you soon. Have a great day.